Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you are doing well. Today I want to do something a little bit different. This isn't a pre-prepared topic, but I wanted to rank all of the mainline Halo games in the lead up to Halo Infinite. As you would have known in my last video, which delved into my gaming shelf, which is currently behind me, I mentioned that Halo is my favorite franchise of all time. See Chief statue. Or helmet there, I should say. And so I thought what might be fun is to actually delve into my love for the Halo franchise, talk about what I enjoy most about these different games, and create a ranking tier list of sorts of all the different mainline Halo games. I won't be touching on the Halo Wars series or any of the top-down isometric games like Halo Spartan Assault or Spartan Strike, or any of the re-releases like Anniversary or Master Chief Collection. We'll just keep it to the mainline Halo games. That is CE, 2, 3, 3 ODST, Reach, 4, 5 Guardians, and that's it. Did I miss anything? No, I think we're good. Let's get into it. Cool, so as you can see here, I am on Tier Maker, and I've jumped into a pre-built Halo games sort of tier list creator, and you can see some of the different games down the bottom there that I won't be ranking. I'm just going to keep it to the mainline games, but we'll go in chronological order of their release, not of, you know, the games and the story and when they occurred. So we'll start with Halo Combat Evolved, and then I'll go through each of them and I'll describe why I'm tiering them as such, and then also and we'll kind of like rank them as we go. So you'll both get like an understanding of what I love about each game, what I don't like about each game, and then also where my final Halo ranking kind of lands. Shall we get into it? Let's do it. Halo Combat Evolved, so as you know, this is what kicked it all off for me. When I first picked up, I'm just going to set it down in A for now. Not that it'll finally land there, but I just want to let go of the mouse. Halo Combat Evolved was the game that really kicked off my love for Xbox, and then that triggered my sort of desire to get more deeper into the industry. I became more fascinated about video games, and it really was, Halo was one of those catalysts. I remember first renting it, actually, before I bought it. The first game that I bought alongside the original Xbox was Gunmetal, which I can't tell you anything about that game except that you were kind of like this fighter jet that transformed into a mech, and then you were just kind of, it was like a sci-fi action storyline. It was really cool, and then we rented Halo a couple of times, and then we got it for in time for that Christmas. We got it as a gift from Santa. Thank you, Santa. And yeah, from that point onwards, man, I was absolutely blown away by this game. Looking back on it now, it's a game that I actually don't think holds up that well in some areas, particularly just around its own mechanics, and you can see that the certain evolution from CE to 2, and how 2 really sort of planted exactly what it means to be a Halo game, sort of mechanically and regarding the gameplay loop. But Halo Combat Evolved still had a lot of those core elements in there, mainly, you know, guns, grenades, and melee. It popularized the 2 weapons at a time system that we see in a lot of shooters nowadays. You know, many first-person shooters prior to that enabled the player to carry as many weapons as they wanted, whereas Halo really sort of made weapon choice matter and something that you thought about as a player. I could go on and on about Halo and just rattle off things that I love that still are true and sort of hold it as one of the greatest games ever made. Obviously the open world level design, the AI, the art style, the music by Marty O'Donnell, just the combat encounters, the vehicles, you know, sort of mechanics and how they play into the wider world as well. It's a fantastic but simple story, and everything just really hits home for this one. Obviously, the level design I mentioned was fantastic across the board, save for the library level. And so I think for now I'm probably going to leave it in A. Actually, I think it deserves its spot there. Nowadays, it controls pretty sluggishly compared to most of the other mainline Halo games, and that's something that I know a lot of people don't like about it. I completely understand. It really doesn't feel like a modern shooter compared to 2 and onwards. So I totally understand that criticism, but I think for the most part, this is a game that still holds up. Obviously, it delivered some fantastic multiplayer back in the day as well, which, you know, speaking honestly, I didn't really get into because it was mainly just co-op with my brother or with my friends or with my cousins that we played Halo. And it wasn't until 2 and 3 later on that I really got into multiplayer and split screen. System link, I should say. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave Halo in A for now. All those things that I mentioned really hold up to this day. But what lets it down right now is just its more sluggish controls. There are some small things as well that shooters nowadays have evolved, and when you go back to something like CE, it's really apparent that they've gotten better about communicating things like when you're taking damage. You get like a quiet shield alarm noise when you're taking a lot of damage and you've lost shields and you start to lose health. But shooters nowadays do a great job of telegraphing where enemy fire is coming from and how close to death you are. It's something that Halo CE and even 2 as well don't do a great job, just in comparison to its contemporaries. So I think for now, Halo Combat Evolved, going to leave it at A. Moving on to Halo 2. Now, I have a fun story about when this game launched. The day it launched, which I think was November 9, 2004, if I recall correctly. That was the day of the first day of my school camp, and I remember going to EB Games early in the morning before school with my mum to pick up my limited edition with the metal case and the making of DVD inside, and driving to school, straight from EB Games, and sitting in the car park reading the manual and all the cool Covenant story that they had in there before I got on the bus and went to school camp. And then I went to camp for like 3 or 4 days. I came back. My brother had played the game and completed like 3 or 4 levels at that point. He wasn't as huge into Halo like I was at the time. But I said, nope, we're deleting the save file, and we started again. And man, Halo 2 changed so much. Like, I won't go into the huge sort of part it played in the success of Xbox Live way back in 2002. But man, there's still so much about that game that holds up. I, for the most part, can recite a lot of the lines throughout those cutscenes as well. Particularly the first one where Covenant first invades Earth. I just think it's a game that really cemented how Halo plays and still plays to this day through a lot of the more modern iterations in the franchise. And there's not much that sort of lets it down. I know at the time there was harsh criticism towards this game way back in 2004 and 2005. If you were around, you recall the backlash to the Arbiter and the fact that we don't play as Chief for half of the game. We have to play this elite that no one cares about. In retrospect, it's really funny to look back and now see Arbiter viewed as this beloved character of the Halo franchise. That's definitely not how the community felt way back in 2004 and going into 05. And it wasn't until Halo 3 came out that people really started to enjoy the Arbiter. And man, Halo 2 does a great job of establishing this lore that didn't exist in CE. Joseph Staten sort of took that nugget and really, carried it forward, and it's expanded upon it with 2 and then into 3. I'm really sad that they recast someone like Michael Wincott as Prophet of Truth from 2 to 3. I don't think Terrence Stamp does a great job in 3. And man, some of those cutscenes you go back and you revisit, particularly after the Halo 2 Anniversary Edition launched with Halo the Master Chief Collection, and you see the fantastic CGI cutscenes that Blur Studio has done with that game. It is still a romp from start to finish, and there are a couple of flood levels, particularly as the Arbiter, that just aren't as fun to play as most of the other levels throughout the game. But man, some fantastic memories with Halo 2, and some new things that they introduced with the game that still stuck around into the iterations later, like dual wielding that made its way to Halo 3 as well. Vehicle hijacking, which is still a mainstay of the franchise. I love this game, and I think overall, in terms of tiering, I probably put it above Halo CE, even though I have this deep core love for the first Halo as the game that kicked off my love for the franchise. I think overall Halo 2 is a better package, and it's particularly when you tie in multiplayer as well and what that game did for the Xbox Live network as well, and what that game meant to Xbox going into the 360 generation. Don't think you can deny that. So I think For the single player, I'd probably put it in A, but I think the multiplayer puts Halo 2 at an S tier. There are so many iconic maps within that multiplayer suite as well that still stands as classics today. And when I go back and play the Master Chief Collection multiplayer, it's usually Halo 2 and Halo 3 that I struggle to pick between, because I have such great love for both those multiplayer suites. So Halo 2, S tier, still one of the greatest games ever made in my mind. Halo 3, I know where this one is going to sit. It is my favorite Halo game, and I think it is the complete package. I think it's a better campaign than Halo 2, and many would argue that Halo 2's multiplayer is better, but I had a greater time with Halo 3 multiplayer because I just had more time with it. I played Halo 2 with mates and at arcades as well, like System Link arcades, but I never really got into it too deeply. And the reason I got into Halo 3 even more is because we got broadband internet in 2006 in between Halo 2 and Halo 3. So I went back and dabbled in Halo 2 even after the 360 came out as a backwards compatible game. But when Halo 3 launched, I was there day dot, loving that multiplayer suite. I was there during the Halo 3 multiplayer beta as well that came along with the very first Crackdown. I couldn't wait for Halo 3 to launch. And when it did in September of 2007, I was instantly in love. It was a game that copped a lot of criticisms at the time because it didn't look the part, particularly with some of the other games that had come out. Gears of War was a year early and had this realistic, gritty feel. But you go back to Halo 3 now, particularly upscaled in I think they're at 4K at this point at 60 frames, either on Xbox Series X or One X or PC, and that art style holds up, man. It's a joy to play to this day, and there's a lot that the Halo 3 campaign does right that the Halo 2 campaign didn't. No longer were you jumping between Master Chief and Arbiter from Halo 2. You were just the Chief. You got to explore. You got to go back to those Halo environments that really instilled this sense of wonder, and that came along in the form of the Ark. And I think to my mind, I think Halo 3's soundtrack is the best out of any Halo game. And I know Halo 2 is held in such high regard as well. But for me, it's the Marty O'Donnell score with the piano keys, like we saw in the E3 2006 announcement trailer, that still gives me chills to this day every time I hear it. And I see tones of that seeping into Halo Infinite as well. And I hope they really lean into that nostalgia and into the great love and history that comes along with a franchise like it. So Halo 3 for me, man, the multiplayer was top notch. They introduced equipment which added this really cool twist. And for me, it's an S tier game by far, and I put it above Halo 2. Even small things that Halo 3 did as well, right, that really fleshed out the entire package, and it's why it sort of part of the reason why it was rated so high at the time is that you got things like saved films, Forge as well, that they didn't have to do. I also know that when Firefight came along in Halo 3 ODST, that's something that Bungie wanted to achieve in Halo 3. They just didn't have the time or the resources, so they saved it for ODST. So Bungie was super ambitious with this package, and they really sort of empowered the content creation community at the time, making some of the fun fan videos as well with that saved film suite that no game at the time was doing. It was almost like photo mode a decade before photo mode really was this hugely popular thing. So man, Halo 3, truly deserving of the praise that it got at the time, and I think stands the test as one of the greatest first-person shooters ever made. Now we get to Halo 3 ODST, which I know in retrospect is seen as one of the best Halo games or Halo campaigns ever made. Truth be told, that was not the feeling when this game first launched. There was a lot of fan confusion around, why aren't we playing as the Chief? And, this just isn't as epic. And I definitely felt it at the time. It's a fun game, and, design-wise, particularly from the open hub level design that Bungie created with the game, really fantastic stuff. The different tone that they set, they sort of had this more moody, grounded, realistic vibe, and you got like a lot in the cinematics in particular. You got all these cool camera angles from the point of the city's sort of security system, which was a character unto itself as well that helped sort of guide you as the rookie along this journey. I love the sort of storytelling mechanic of playing within the boots of each of the different ODST squad members of the squad that you're a part of, and some really just different great storytelling that the Halo games leading up to that point hadn't really explored. For me, though, this really just comes down to what I love about Halo and the fact that it just didn't have that sense of wonder. I think it's still a fantastically designed game, and you can't argue the simplistic genius of something like Firefight that still persists in games today, and we see it prop up in a lot of other franchises as well, notably Gears of War Horde mode, which came a few years after that. So I think for me, Halo 3, I'm going to put it as A, and I'm going to put it ahead of Combat Evolved simply because it still to this day plays fantastically like those other games that came after CE as well. So yeah, CE just really, I suppose, sits under it because of how sluggishly and how slow it feels by today's standards. Halo 3 ODST, I can go back to and still have a fantastic time like I can with 2 and 3. So for me, that's why it's an A, and it sits above Combat Evolved. Oh man, now Halo Reach. This is one that up until this point I've kind of known where in my head I'm gonna rank these games, but this one's gonna be tough for me. Halo Reach, I think, is probably the best Halo campaign, second only to 3. I think the storytelling that Bungie employs in Reach is on another level, and I remember saying this at the time, but it didn't really receive the praise that I think it truly deserved. And were it to land as the exact same game but under a different IP or a different name from a different developer, then I think the industry at the time would have been applauding it as this, holy crap, what is this first-person shooter? The story's fantastic, the mechanics are fantastic. It plays as one of the best shooters ever made. But because it was like the 5th iteration in the Halo franchise and Bungie's swan song to the franchise, we already had the announcement of 343 already coming in and being the ones to now shepherd Halo. I feel as though it didn't get the credit it truly deserves. You go back to it now, and to my point about contemporary Halo games, particularly from Bungie in the later years, they play fantastically. The storytelling in Reach is phenomenal. It's sort of this. I remember them talking about it as if they said they wanted to create a cinematic style that was realistic, in that every single shot was only made understanding that it had to be able to be achieved by a human and a real camera, which is why you see, in one of the night levels as well, you see the camera sort of being held by someone as they're right next to June, and they're shimmying along the rock face. You see the camera attached to different vehicles, or I suppose different tech within the world of Reach as well. You see different security camera perspectives also, just like you saw in Halo 3 ODST. The storytelling style in Reach is fantastic, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the end as well. Halo 3 and CE Warthog runs aside, it's easily the best ending to a Halo game, and one of the best endings in any video game as well. No spoilers, even though the game is eons old at this point. But some fantastic design in Reach. Bungie doesn't get the credit that they deserve for this game, and for that reason, I'm going to stick it in S tier. But it's going to be behind Halo 2, and that's because the Halo Reach multiplayer suite wasn't nearly as, I suppose, polished as the other previous games from Bungie. It felt amazing, and the implementation of what they were trying to achieve was great, but what they created in some ways almost didn't feel like Halo, and it kind of took it in a direction that 343 kind of inherited and ran with these armor abilities that served their purpose but weren't as, I suppose, interesting to play as in something like in 3 before it. So what's great about equipment in Halo 3 is that it can be an advantage to you as a player, but it can also work against you. Look at the bubble shield, and some of that design philosophy is definitely present in Reach with its armor abilities. So arm lock, for instance, gives you invincibility, but it also keeps you in one place, stationary, which is a huge risk as a player, right? So the philosophy carried forward, but it didn't really translate into what felt like a Halo multiplayer suite. And then I think 343 inherits that with Halo 4 and is kind of what undoes all that great Halo DNA with that multiplayer suite. we'll get to that in a moment. But for now, Halo Reach, S tier, fantastic game, and Firefight as well, a great sort of addition to the suite, and the value that came in a package like Reach. But I go back to my original point. I think it is the strongest Halo campaign, second only to Halo 3, and the design, the storytelling of those of Reach in particular is fantastic. Oh, and I'd also be remiss to not mention the fact that for whatever reason, Bungie retcons Chief and Cortana's original origin story, which they established in the book, Halo Fall of Reach, written by Eric Nyland, and they bring forward threads of that story into Halo 3, and they completely undo it in Reach. It's the one thing about the Halo Reach campaign story that I vehemently despise, and I don't recognize that part of the of Reach's story as canon, at least in my own mind, because it's nowhere near as strong as the origin story for Chief and Cortana that is established in Fall of Reach. Hardcore Halo fans know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, straight on to Halo 4 now. I know exactly where this one's going, and it is, for the moment, at the very bottom. As a B game, I think it is a fantastic first effort from the team at 343 Industries, and they really nail a lot of what makes Halo great, particularly with the relationship between Chief and Cortana. I think in some instances they push it a bit far, and but no, for the most part, that story arc that carries through with both of them really fleshes out the Chief and Cortana relationship, and really allows us to find us in the position that we do right now, with the relationship with Chief and Cortana. Obviously Halo 5 Guardians plays a part in that as well, but it's really that next chapter in the Chief and Cortana storyline that allows us to take the journey that we're still currently on, and I'm really excited to see continue in something like Halo Infinite. Where 343 really dropped the ball was with the multiplayer, and you can tell if you go back and you read the articles leading up to the launch of Halo 4 way back in 2012, is they were trying to take the DNA of what made Halo multiplayer great, but modernize it in a world where Call of Duty was reigning king. They brought in their own kill streak system, which really just messed up the Halo formula and the arena map control design philosophy that really rung true in all the prior games developed by Bungie. So that was a mistake on 343's part, and I think you see that being recognized by them in Halo 5, which we'll get to in a moment, and also how they're carrying that forward with Halo Infinite as well. So for me, Halo 4 gets a B. I thought at the time Prometheans were rather interesting to fight. They added this new twist to the gameplay, and for the most part, the gunplay and all the mechanics felt really great. What the Prometheans really lack is personality, and that's something you don't see in Halo 5 either. And that's one of my few flags for concern is in Halo Infinite, is that if they bring back the Prometheans some way, how are they interesting to fight? Because I think they're almost pigeonholed like the Flood, in that because they have no existing personality, that they won't be interesting to fight at all unless we have some kind of leader of the Prometheans who is interesting in and of themselves. We had the Didact in Halo 4. I think if you're not a hardcore Halo fan, you don't understand him and why he and the Librarian are important, then it's completely lost on you. Some cool voice acting, but for the most part, I think that side of the Halo 4 story is kind of take it or leave it. And when we look back at the entire, I suppose, arc of Master Chief, that will stand as kind of like this weird blind spot that's really not important to be across, because it really seems like they're bringing it back to the simple save the galaxy Chief Cortana relationship that we love from the original game. So that's what I'm really hoping for. Halo 4 lands at a B for now. I think for the most part it gets a lot of those core mechanics right, and the design really strong. Some of the level design's fantastic. The art in the game is really strong also. It's a decent shooter. Like, I would give it, if I had to rate it at the time, I would have given it like an 8 out of 10. I think it's really strong. It's just not the Halo game that we wanted. And then on to Halo 5 Guardians. For this one, I'm probably going to put it at a B as well, but above Halo 4. And honestly, like, purely because of the multiplayer, it's getting close to an A for me. Now, I think that's, some people might view that as blasphemous. Oh my god, you're putting it at the same level as CE and Halo 3 ODST. But I really love Halo 5's multiplayer, and I think it gets a lot of what Bungie got right and brings it forward into a modern era, but still gives you the speed that a lot of first-person shooter fans nowadays really enjoy. So I can't. There's not much I can say. I honestly, I've had as much fun in Halo 5's multiplayer as I have 3 and 2 before it. So yeah, I can't stress enough how much I love that suite, and yeah, how much fun it is to play today. I wish it was on PC because I'd be playing it. It's really, really good. Obviously, the other side of the coin is Halo 5's campaign, which I'll start with the positives. Some really cool ideas. I like that they bring back Arbiter. I like that we get some, some cool deep dives into his history and what's going on with the Covenant sort of civil war that's happening and the schism there. We get to visit Sang Helios, which is really exciting. There are some other cool missions that I love that explore different sides of the Halo universe that we haven't really seen before. Things like when you go to Meridian and you see Governor Sloan for the first time, who's this sort of like decaying AI as well, and what he's doing to sort of stave off his own rampancy and still manage this planet that he's in control of. I thought that was really cool. Some things that really didn't land in Halo 5, small things before we get onto the actual story, and that is these interesting moments where they give player control of Chief or of Locke, and you're just walking around these different environments interacting with NPCs. I like the ambition here and what 343 was going for, but just really didn't land. It wasn't interesting at all. You can use the that ping system they implemented in Halo 5 to sort of know exactly where you were going, and that is definitely a mechanic of the time as well. We've seen that implemented in so many other games. It's not even funny. It's a mechanic that I actually really hate. But yeah, no, there's just, man, the Halo 5 story. What were they thinking? I think you play as Chief for 3 levels? I haven't gone back to the Halo 5 campaign in a long time. They do some really interesting things with verticality and level design that I really admire. But for the most part, it's just, it doesn't feel like Halo anymore. Again, the Prometheans aren't very interesting to fight. I think some of the art design as well gets away from the simplicity of what we love about Halo as well, and the bright colors. Team Osiris, for whatever reason, is way more interesting than Blue Team, which is just something I never would have guessed would happen in a Halo game. As someone who really enjoys those first novels and learning about Fred, Kelly, and Linda and John, and even Sam, rest in peace, before them as well, to see that finally be implemented into the game and land with a complete emotional thud was so disheartening and so disappointing. And then you get these really interesting interactions with Team Osiris, and you learn about Tanaka and Vale and Buck as well. I really don't like the Spartan 4s, and so I just don't like the idea of them in general, and the fact that any human can become a Spartan. I think that sort of, as a hardcore Halo fan, call me jaded or whatever, but that kind of betrays what Spartan 2s and 3s originally were all about. So I think they can actually do some really interesting things with that storytelling. Whether they decide to touch up on that, I'm not sure. But yeah, no, there was so much that was wrong with the Halo 5 Guardians storyline. It's honestly a real mess, and man, that fight between Locke and Chief is just a complete wet blanket on or what it means to be a Spartan, and how that actually would go in if the Halo universe was seated in any kind of reality. It's really, really disappointing, and I think it shows the 343 sometimes they really get it wrong, and those I suppose seeds of concern are still buried deep within me, and I'm a bit worried for Halo Infinite. What they've shown so far, it seems like they've got a really strong understanding of the franchise now, and I think with Joe back on board, that they can really take the franchise to a new level, and they really seem to understand what we want from Halo game and what makes Halo great. And still, I get back to Halo 3 campaign or multiplayer and still have a blast. I think they can find a way to make Halo beloved again amongst first-person shooter fans in 2021 and beyond, and because it's still fun to the core community that's there. It's just about showing them, the wider audience, why it is still really, really enjoyable to this day. But man, yeah, Halo 5, a B as well as Halo 4. It would be behind Halo 4 were it not for the multiplayer. So yeah, that's kind of my ranking, guys. As you can see, really a ranking that's the product of where I am in my life, or where Halo landed in my lifetime. Again, Halo 3, the first multiplayer Halo game that I really was able to sink my teeth into. And yeah, Reach I think has fantastic design. I can't wait for Halo Infinite. I don't think it has as a prayer of, you know, being above Halo 3. We'll have to wait and see. And if 343 Industries knocks it out of the park, and it is that, I will gladly eat my Master Chief helmet behind me. But we're just gonna have to wait and see, I suppose. Anyway, guys, that is my ranking of the Halo games, the mainline Halo games up until this point. Let me know your ranking in the comments below. I'm sure many of you disagree with how I've ranked the games. Tell me, you know, why you justify your ranking the way you do. Yeah. Like I said, Halo's my favorite franchise. Cannot wait for Halo Infinite. If you did enjoy the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. There'll be plenty more content to come. Until next time, happy gaming.